The United States has sanctioned Iranian oil for over 4 decades. The entire legal and financial architecture of those sanctions exists for one reason: to stop countries from buying Iranian oil and funding the Iranian government. That is the official position of the United States of America. Now here is the actual US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on CNBC this month when asked whether Chinese ships are getting through the Strait of Hormuz to buy Iranian oil. He said, and I'm quoting directly, "We are fine with that." 3 words. We are fine with that. America sanctioned the oil, started a war over the regime that sells it, and then told the world's largest buyer of that oil, "Go ahead. Keep buying." That is not a conspiracy theory. That is not an editorial opinion. That is the United States government's stated position in March 2026. And once you understand why they said it, this entire crisis looks completely different. What sanctions were supposed to do to understand how extraordinary that statement is, you need to understand what US sanctions on Iranian oil were actually designed to achieve. Since 1979, the US has used oil sanctions as its primary economic weapon against Iran. Logic is simple. Iran earns roughly 40% of its government revenue from oil exports. Cut the oil revenue, starve the government, change the behavior. Under the Trump first term, the maximum pressure campaign drove Iranian oil exports down to under 200,000 barrels a day. Iran's economy contracted by 15% in a single year. The rail lost 60% of its value. The sanctions were working. Then China found a workaround, and Washington looked the other way. By 2024, Iran was exporting over 1,500,000 barrels a day again, almost entirely to China, despite sanctions technically still being enforced. The enforcement collapsed, not because the law changed, but because enforcing it against China carried a cost America wasn't willing to pay. So by the time the bombs dropped on February 28th, the sanctions were already a fiction. America declared war on a country it was already letting fund itself. How China buys sanctioned oil. Here is exactly how the transaction works, because this isn't happening in the shadows. The method is well documented. It's just rarely explained clearly. Step 1, Iran loads oil onto tankers with their AIS tracking transponders switched off. These are called dark ships or ghost vessels. There are currently an estimated 400 to 600 tankers operating this way globally, the majority connected to Iranian or Russian oil. Step 2, the tanker travels to a transfer point, usually near the coast of Malaysia, the UAE, or the waters off Fujairah. There, it conducts a ship-to-ship transfer, pumping the oil onto a second tanker that has clean documentation and a legitimate registry. Step 3, that second tanker sails into a Chinese port, Jushan, Qingdao, Ningbo, and declares the cargo as Malaysian or Emirati crude. Chinese customs accepts the documentation. The oil enters the Chinese refinery system. Step 4, the payment flows back to Iran through a network of front companies often routed through accounts in Hong Kong, the UAE, or Turkey. US dollar transactions are avoided entirely. The result, Iranian oil enters China perfectly legally under Chinese law, which does not recognize US secondary sanctions, and China pays Iran roughly $60 a barrel for oil. The rest of the world is paying $105 for right now. That $45 discount is the sanction premium, and China pockets every dollar of it. How much money this is? Let's put numbers to this, because the scale of what's happening is what makes Bessent's statement so significant. Before the February 28th strikes, China was importing approximately 1,500,000 barrels of Iranian oil per day at a $45 discount per barrel. That is $67,500,000 in savings per day every single day. Since the Strait closure, that number has changed. Iranian oil moving through ghost ship networks has actually increased because Iran front-loaded exports before the conflict. Analysts tracking satellite data estimate Iran has approximately 170 million barrels sitting on tankers at sea right now, pre-sold largely to Chinese buyers. At $60 a barrel, the discounted price China is paying, that is $10.2 billion, sitting on ships, already sold, already funded. That money funds the IRGC. It funds the missile program. It funds the very military operation that America is currently spending billions to counter. The United States is fighting a war against an enemy that China is simultaneously financing, and Washington said, "We are fine with that." Why America is letting it happen? This is the part that requires some uncomfortable honesty. Because the reason isn't stupidity, it isn't oversight, it is a very deliberate calculation. Reason 1, enforcing sanctions against China means secondary.